Welcome to today's Explainer. It's fascinating how deeply interconnected our world really is. How exactly does a closed-door meeting in Washington and rising tensions in the Persian Gulf end up directly impacting someone buying groceries over in Tokyo? Well, we're looking at the global events of May 29th, 2026, where a single diplomatic move triggered one of the most massive oil drops in history. It's just a perfect example of how local decisions create these profound global ripples, and today we're going to trace exactly how that unfolded.
Here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with Middle East tensions and hopes, move into the global economic ripple, examine Japan's demographic and defense pivot, and wrap up with health, law, and tragedies.
Section 1. Middle East Tensions and Hopes. Right out of the gate, we have this massive, undeniable contrast between high-level negotiations and the reality on the ground. On one side, there's a lot of optimism coming from the U.S. President Trump just convened a really intense 2-hour Situation Room meeting. The focus? A proposed 60-day ceasefire and the crucial reopening of the Strait of Hormuz, all while strictly maintaining red lines to keep Iran from getting nuclear weapons. But, on the other side, immediate pushback. Iranian officials are flat-out contesting the public claims that they ever agreed to hand over or destroy their enriched uranium stockpile. And you can really hear the friction in this quote. Responding to those U.S. claims about the uranium, an Iranian official actually called the messaging a mixture of truth and lies. So yeah, it's a pretty stark reminder of the immense communication gap here. Diplomatic optimism in Washington doesn't always reflect the immediate stance of the folks sitting on the other side of the table.
Because, look, the reality on the ground is entirely different. It's not just a war of words. Iranian state media claimed they shot down a U.S. jet near Jam in the Bushehr province. Now, U.S. CENTCOM immediately and firmly denied that report, saying no aircraft went down. But the region is incredibly volatile. In Mount Lebanon, an Israeli airstrike hit the town of Shuifet. And tragically, local authorities report that the blast killed 3 people, including 2 children, and wounded 15 others.
And that geopolitical friction, it's definitely spilling over into other regions. Over in Europe, there was a major breach of NATO airspace. A Russian drone crashed straight into a residential apartment in Galați, Romania, injuring 2 civilians. Meanwhile, up in Canada, Prime Minister Mark Carney actually bypassed 2 competing U.S. options to buy European-built surveillance planes for Arctic sovereignty. It's a pretty significant shift, prioritizing European defense ties right in North America's backyard.
Section 2. The global economic ripple.
Now, shifts like the ones we just talked about never happen in a vacuum. Check out this number, $87.64. That is the price WTI crude fell to. Why did it drop so much? Purely because financial markets reacted to the speculative hope that the U.S.-Iran conflict might ease and that the Strait of Hormuz might finally reopen. To really put that into perspective, Brent crude fell right alongside it to $91.54. We're talking about a historic 12% drop in global oil prices in just a single week. It's kind of wild when you think about it. Just the mere potential for peace, easing those global inflation fears, was enough to drive one of the biggest weekly commodity plunges we've ever seen. So what does this actually mean for everyday life? Well, if you're in the U.S., it means immediate relief at the gas pump. After hitting a year-high peak just a week earlier on May 21st, the U.S. national gas average dropped 16 cents in a single week, down to $4.39. It's a literal, tangible ripple effect from those closed-door Situation Room meetings straight to your local gas station. But here's the catch. That ripple doesn't look the same everywhere. While the U.S. is getting cheaper gas, consumers in Japan are bracing for a very different reality. They're facing sharp June price hikes across more than 1,000 food and beverage items. And the main reason? Those lingering logistics costs and disruptions in the Middle East. It just goes to show how interconnected supply chains are. Relief in one hemisphere can happen at the exact same time as rising costs in another. Section 3. Japan's demographic and defense pivot. Which brings us to Japan. Today, the nation is dealing with some truly existential shifts. Look at this number from the newly released census data. 3.1 million. That's how much Japan's total population has dropped by. It's a record 2.5% plunge over just a 5-year period. That is an absolutely astronomical demographic shift for any country to handle. And the really wild part is where the remaining population is moving. Over 30% of the country's population is now heavily concentrated in Tokyo alone, which means the rest of Japan, it's experiencing a dramatic, rapid hollowing out. So how exactly does a nation respond to a shrinking population at home while global tensions rise abroad? Well, domestically, the Japanese parliament just passed sweeping legislation making childbirth virtually free in principle, tackling that demographic crisis head-on. But internationally, they're pivoting hard on defense. In a truly historic move, the defense minister sent 4 self-defense force personnel to the NATO Ukraine headquarters in Germany to study modern tactical warfare. Plus, Defense Minister Shinjiro Koizumi used the Shangri-La dialogue to enter talks about exporting Japan's Mogami-class frigates to New Zealand. So they're fortifying their society from within while actively expanding their military footprint abroad.
Section 4. Health, Law, and Tragedies.
To wrap up today's explainer, let's look at a few other crucial headlines from around the globe. In the U.S., District Judge Leonie Brinkema issued a temporary restraining order freezing a $1.8 billion DOJ fund created by the Trump administration for citizens alleging political targeting, halting any premature transfers. Over in Nigeria, the government strictly banned inbound flights from the DR Congo, South Sudan, and Uganda to prevent the spread of a Central African Ebola epidemic. In Virginia, a horrific multi-vehicle crash on I-95 involving a commercial passenger bus and 6 cars left 5 dead and 34 severely injured. And in Kenya, police arrested 8 students following a devastating intentional arson at a Nakuru County girls' school, leading the state to immediately dissolve the school's board over fire safety negligence. Which leaves us with this final thought. When a single speculative headline about a ceasefire can shift the entire global economy and slash oil prices by 12% in just a week, how prepared are we for tomorrow's news? The events of today are a massive reminder of just how deeply interconnected our world truly is. By following the data and digging into the structures behind the headlines, we can start to see that bigger picture. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep staying curious, keep asking questions, and I'll see you next time.